My name is Charles Hallman, MSR Sports columnist, and welcome to Blacklight on Sports.
And I'm Dr. Mitchell Palmer McDonald. I'm a columnist here at the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder. And we want to welcome you all to Blacklight on Sports, into our first podcast. Our first guest today is Robert Mestas. Robert Mestas, very well known in the community, particularly on the South Side, as a basketball player from Minneapolis Roosevelt. Went on to play at Miami of Ohio and also coached at his alma mater. How you doing today, Robert?
I'm great, man. Thank you. I appreciate y'all for having me.
Okay, been good. First question I have, just talk a little bit about your background. Talk a little bit about where did you get your love for basketball, and then how that has helped you develop into the person you are today.
Yeah, man. First of all, thanks for having me again, man. It's great that you asked me that question because I started playing ball. One of the reasons is this man right here. I didn't play basketball like on a team. I kind of just played at the park or whatever. But what I made sure I did was I was at community centers and things like that, Boys and Girls Clubs. I got lucky and was part of the Big Brother, Big Sister organization. And Clyde Turner invited me to his camp. And I remember going to tell my mom, like, hey, I need to go to this camp. It's $20. Can I go? And we didn't have the $20, but Clyde let me go for free. And it was an week-long camp, overnight at Camp Annandale. It was great. And so after that, I got a chance to meet Craig LeSueur and Coach Hallman and Clyde Turner. And it really sparked my interest for the game. It was an opportunity for me growing up in South Minneapolis to have an outlet, something that I could do every day. Not hanging out in the neighborhood, not following everybody else around, but I had something I could do. And so I was lucky enough to meet those folks at the Clyde Turner basketball camp, and it introduced me to the game, and I've been in love with it ever since.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, Rob, I've seen you since fourth grade. I've seen you grow. I keep telling people two players that I love watching play, even as a coach, was you and Khalid El-Amin, because I thought you were the two quickest players that could get to one end of the court to another with the ball. But talk about, you played college ball at Miami, Ohio. You played with Wally Zerbiak, who said that you might have been his best point guard he ever played with, period, pros or whatever. But talk about playing for Charlie Coles, who coached with my high school coach. They were very close friends. But talk about that experience and how that helped you formulate you as a young man.
So when I first went to Miami, I was recruited by Sean Miller, Herb Sendek, and good basketball guys. They've been known in the basketball community forever. But I was lucky I was able to meet Coach Coles. Now, Coach Coles, people who don't know Coach Coles, he went to Compton Community College. He's from Ohio. He's from Yellow Springs, Ohio. He averaged in high school, and I have to say this because it kind of shows you the kind of person he was, but he averaged 42 points a game in high school with no three-point line. And so he was a killer by nature, right? He's from Youngstown. Yellow Springs or Youngstown, one of the two. Sorry, Coach. He's passed away, rest in peace. But he would always talk about his upbringing, how he grinded for everything. He never took any BS from nobody. He was the kind of guy who he would tell you exactly how he felt, and I respected that about him, man. After my freshman year, I went to Miami. I didn't play that much. I started getting clocked around the second half of the year where I started starting, but I was ready to leave. I was going to come back, talking to John Thomas. I was going to come back to the U. If I was going to sit, I might as well come back home. And I remember one time sitting in the stands with Coach Coles, telling him my plans, and he said, look, Herb won't be here next year. Herb is going to be gone. At the time, he was a big-time coach. He was starting to get a lot of love from the majors. And he said, most likely, I'll be here, and I would love for you to be my point. After the season, like we thought, Herb Sendek went to NC State, and Coach Coles was there. They named him the head coach, and I knew I wasn't going anywhere. I stayed in touch with Coach Coles until the day he passed. I was one of his pallbearers once he did pass. But wonderful guy, wonderful family. he really taught me how to be a man. You know, and he grew up very similar to probably most everybody in this room. And so he was somebody I could relate to.
Okay. I know you, the first time I saw you play was at De La Salle. I think you were a freshman. And then the very next year you were at Roosevelt as a sophomore. Talk about your experience there in that transition. What made you go to Roosevelt, and what was your experience at like both schools?
First of all, I had a great experience at De La Salle. Starting as a freshman, we actually started 2 freshmen. Big Adrian Patterson, who was one of my best friends at the time at De La Salle. But I remember our freshman year, we started 2 freshmen, lost in the state championship. And people were saying, oh, you wouldn't do that in the city. Now, keep in mind, I'm from the city. I'm from the hood. I'm from right here. I've played against all the guys in the city. But there was a lot of noise, a little background noise, like, oh, Rob, you wouldn't be doing that. You wouldn't be playing varsity as a freshman in the city conference. And so what I did was I turned around after the season. Darren, who was a senior, he was graduating. Big Adrian was going back to Washburn, where we both played our youth ball. And I just decided to go over at the time. My best friend, Elijah Hanna, was over at Roosevelt, Big John Thomas, Bebop Walker, Sam Willis. So I said, you know what, let me go over to the Minneapolis City Conference. They said I couldn't play in the city conference, so I decided to go to the city conference and win Mr. Basketball. I felt like I had a lot to prove to myself, to the naysayers, and I think I was able to at least go over there and prove my point. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Now, you played pro ball as well. A lot of people think the NBA is the only way you can play pro ball, but you played overseas. Talk about that experience and how that went, because overseas, if you've never been overseas before, that can be a shock, a culture shock for anybody who's been in America and never been over there before, especially now you're trying to play basketball as well and deal with the culture. So talk about your overseas experience.
Yeah, and I think, when you go overseas now, I think it's a lot different. When I went, you could have 2 Americans or, just 2 non-residents. So I was in Oldenburg, Germany. We happen to have 2 Americans, but this is pre-internet, or we had internet, but it was dial-up, AOL. People didn't have cell phones, things like that. My very first paycheck, my phone bill was more than my first paycheck. So it was a good learning experience for me to go over there and understand that I was living in a place where people didn't speak English. The only people that spoke English was the folks in the military. I was young, single, going to bars, and I would remember seeing brothers from the United States thinking, oh, I got somebody I can go talk to. I got somebody I can be around. But when they see another American come in and, the military, they're already kind of the big dogs on campus or in the town. And so it wasn't as open and friendly as I thought it would be. But you know what? It was a great experience. I was ready to leave. I was there for about 4 months. And then I came back home and went to the CBA, or it was the IBA. It went from the CBA to the IBA when Isaiah Thomas bought the league. And it was the Dakota Wizards out of Bismarck, North Dakota. We won a championship. It was a tremendous experience to get paid to play. It wasn't big money. It wasn't NBA money. But I had an opportunity to win a championship, professional championship. Matter of fact, in February, we're going back with the entire group that won the championship my rookie year for the Wizards. A lot of those folks I still talk to. Some of them are head coaches. Some of them had long overseas careers. But for me, injuries took its toll. I had my degree. It was just time for me to call it a career. I thought that I could play for fun after. I could teach. I could coach. And my current wife, my only wife, I shouldn't say my current wife, but she had my first son, Lil Rob. She was pregnant, and I had an opportunity to go back to Europe, and I decided not to. I decided to just coach and teach and start my life here back at home, and so that's what I did.
Okay. Well, I know you coached at Roosevelt, and then you went on to coach at Burnsville, and you coached with a person who was one of your rivals when you were in high school in Khalid El-Amin. And I thought it was interesting when you were coaching, I came to see you, and I saw both of you there. Because the last time I saw both of you were on the court kind of talking back and forth with each other during the games and kind of laughing and smiling about it. Talk about your coaching experience at Roosevelt. It must have been really special to go back to your alma mater and be able to do that. And then talk about your experience coaching at Burnsville with Khalid.
So when I was at Roosevelt, I remember when Khalid came back and he was coaching with North. He was assistant coach with Larry McKenzie. And every time we played North, I tried to get Khalid to come over with me. But he's not leaving North as an assistant to become an assistant at Roosevelt. But one of the things that I always wanted to do as a coach was make sure I hired somebody who had equal or better of a career than I did, because I don't want yes men. So prior to Khalid at Roosevelt, I had Jason Daisy. You guys know who Jason Daisy is. He led Division I in scoring at Northern Iowa. One of the best players I've ever been around. And the reason why I hired him was because I knew he wasn't going to look at me and say, okay, you know everything. We'll just do whatever you want to do. You can't build like that. You got to have somebody who you can trust. Obviously, me and Khalid grew up together. I met Khalid at Clyde Turner Camp. He's a couple years younger than me, but he never seemed his age. He always seemed a little bit older. We played AAU together. We traveled the country together. And I just knew to have somebody like him on my staff at Burnsville, it would change, it would improve the dynamic of the entire program. We were lucky to get his son, Ibrahim El-Amin, to come over. So it was a great experience. We were there for 2 years, and we were going to continue that, but then COVID happened. Khalid was still trying to figure out what he wanted to do. He was working with CBS at the time as well. And so we just kind of both made the decision that we were going to call it, take a break. Khalid obviously went back to continue coaching, but for me, I like watching the game. I love being able to observe. I also work on the Mr. Basketball Committee with with about 11 other guys and ladies, Lisa Delgado and a couple other folks that you guys know. And so I'm still around the game. I just don't get an opportunity to be in the gym every day with folks. But it was a great experience having Khalid with me, Jason Daisy, Elijah Hanna, Bruce Weston. I surrounded myself with guys that weren't yes men, and that's kind of that was my focus.
Now, they always say that point guards are natural coaches. So when you became a coach, and I have to say this, you was at South before you went to Roosevelt, what thing that you could take as a player that you immediately added to your game as a coach? Because oftentimes sometimes they say great players don't have the ability to coach kids because their standards are so high. So what did you do that as a player that you was able to put in as a coach right away that made you successful?
So for me, I think I took a little bit from everybody that I was coached by. So a little bit of Craig LeSueur, a little bit of Coach Hallman, a little bit of Frank Hinches, a little bit of Charlie Coles, Herb Sendek. For me, basketball has always been kind of easy, like having a feel for the game as a point guard. That's always been something I felt good about. But the one thing that I didn't know how to do right away was X's and O's, as far as writing on the whiteboard, the little things, the tedious logistics that you don't think about, the time commitment. But the basketball piece doesn't change. As a coach, a lot of times teams are going to take on the personality of their coach. So if you ever watched us play, we were up and down. We played fast on the defensive end, even if we weren't great offensively, and that was able to keep us in games. But for me, I always say this: if I could pick one player, so they say you could have a shooter, you can have a 7-footer, you can have a point guard. For me, I'm picking a point guard every single time. Somebody who can be the coach on the floor, be an extension of what I need to do, knows all the plays, knows where Coach Hallman needs to be, knows where Dr. Mitchell needs to be. I want those guys to be able to lead the team from the court while I'm leading it from the bench. So I think a lot of my experience helped me coaching, but when it's all said and done, it's about the players. And so finding myself a good point guard who can listen, that's always been my number one goal.
I like to step back a little bit. Like I say, I've known Rob since he was a fourth grader. And we lost a great man in Clyde Turner. You and I got the chance to spend some time with Clyde just before he passed away. Talk about how much impact he had on your life.
Man, that's heavy, Coach. Clyde meant a lot to me. Earlier, when you guys asked me, like, how did you start showing interest in basketball? What made you want to play basketball? And I kind of attribute that to Clyde Turner. He taught me so much more than basketball. Like I said, when we first talked about that camp and it was $20 and I didn't have the $20, in my experience, most of the time you wouldn't be able to go, right? But Clyde never made that an issue. Now, his expectation is if I'm allowing you to come to my camp for free, your ass better be on time, right? If I'm allowing you to come to my camp, I don't want you, sleeping in. You need to be at class. You need to work hard on the court. He taught me so many things about life that I still think about today. Coach Hallman, we talk about it all the time. We talk about what he meant to us as people. And it's tough because he just passed away recently. It's one of those things that I still think about. I remember receiving a letter from his daughter, and I put it in a frame because she told me a lot of things, how he felt about me. And I always wanted to tell him how I felt about him, and to find out that he felt the same way about me and he was proud of me. To me, that was enough. And obviously a great man. It's emotional, man. But Clyde, somebody that I would never forget, somebody who's had a great impact on my life.
So we're going to take a break, and we'll come back and spend some more time with Rob Mestas. Welcome back. This is Charles Hallman, and to my far left is Dr. Mitchell McDonald. Blacklight On Sports. I gotta get the title down. Okay. Our guest today is Rob Mestas, who is a basketball legend in the prep circles, and has played at all 3 levels, all 4 levels, if you want to call that, and now has coached, and now is a educational specialist. And I ask you, talk about that. What you're doing? You was in the classroom, and now you're doing some other things that's keeping your hand in education.
Yeah, talk about you were teaching first, right?
Yeah.
So talk about that, and then what led up to what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to be a teacher. I've always wanted to find a way to work with students, work with people who grew up the same way as me. I grew up on public assistance. I grew up on WIC. I understand what it feels like to open up the refrigerator and nothing in there but a glass of water, like no food in your refrigerator, right? And so there has to be somebody in your life, especially coming from a single parent home, somebody that you can count on to be able to lead you in a direction where you have an opportunity for success. And I feel like being a teacher, I had the opportunity to make that impact on kids that grew up in the same situation as me. And so I spent some years working as a physical education teacher in the Minneapolis City Conference for Minneapolis Public Schools. Then I moved on to higher education. I worked at Central Lakes College, Hennepin Technical College. And so one of the things that basketball allowed me to do was teach and then work with students on the basketball court afterwards. And I was great. I was going to do that for the rest of my life. But what happened was when COVID happened, it was time for me to make a decision. I had spent several years, 9 years as a head coach, who knows how many as an assistant. And all of those years, I missed being around my kids. I have a son who's a senior. He's a basketball player with an opportunity, hopefully, to play at the Division I level. And I wanted to work in education, but not in the classroom. So one, I didn't get pressured into coaching, so I can make sure I can focus on him, train him. So I currently work for Innocent Technologies, LLC, and what we do is we have a service called the Innocent Classroom, and we work with educators, we work with leaders, principals, deans, and what we do is we talk about the power of developing relationships. how to eliminate narrative and bias from the classroom. So, for example, a lot of teachers go into teaching, and when a student comes into the classroom, they're acting up. What's the first thing a teacher does? Kicks them, sends them to the principal, right? And so we help teachers understand that students are making decisions based on things that are happening to them. And so we help teachers understand it's not personal. Let's eliminate narratives and bias that society tells us about our children, especially Black, brown, and indigenous children, and let's instead create spaces of innocence. So that way when they come into the classroom, that they can understand that you as a teacher actually care about them. We believe that students or children will trust teachers if they believe that that teacher actually cares about them. And so we talk about stereotype consciousness, stereotype threat. And a lot of times people look at it and they're like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? So this is an example I give. So one time I was coaching the Minnesota Magic. KMOJ, Big Sam, invited me up to do a fundraiser with my AAU team. And I had 2 kids from Lake City and I had 2 kids from inner city. I had Lakai, Big Luke Patterson's son, and Cornell from Minneapolis. And then I had 2 kids from Lake City. And we went in there and there was a big banner in KMOJ and it said, Minnesota Magic, welcome. And it had Cheetos and Gatorade and all this stuff. And it was for us. So we walk in and me and the 2 kids from Lake City, we jetted over to the table, right? Those snacks are for us. So we go grab our snacks. Cornell and Lakai was sitting back in the background just chilling. Now they're in like 5th grade at the time. I look over and I'm like, well, Cornell, Lakai, how come you're not grabbing the chips, or how come you're not getting something to eat? And Cornell was like, Coach, I don't want them folks thinking I'm greedy. And then, the other kid, Lakai, was like, I didn't bring money. I just didn't know if we could go over there. And so the reason why that's important is because you notice the 2 kids from Lake City, they didn't stop their experience from happening. They went right in. They knew they didn't have any type of narrative or bias. They didn't have to think about other things that people were going to say about them. They just went and enjoyed the experience. In the classroom, imagine what kids are doing. They're not necessarily bad at math, but they're scared to say the wrong answer because what are people going to think about them? So they're battling all this narrative, all this bias, and we help educators understand what that is.
Sounds good.
Rob, how do you define success for you? I mean, you are a father, you're a husband, you're an educator, you're a coach, you're a Black man in this society. How do you measure or define success, and how you elude that when you out in the public, when you're away, when you leave your house? How do people see you and know that you are a success?
Yeah, I think that answer changes as I get older. A lot of times you ask people, at least you ask me, a younger me, I label myself successful as long as my children have a better life than myself. But for me now, success is being happy with who I am, happy with life, enjoying life, understanding the people that care about me, making sure that I show them gratitude for caring about me, for supporting me, being selfless. I think one of the things that we often do when we're on the grind, especially coaching or teaching, is a lot of times it's about ourselves, right? Making sure that our lesson plans are top of the line, that we're making the Minnesota Department of Education happy with how we're laying out plans. But in the reality, it's about the students, it's about the kids, it's about them having an ability to be able to trust me as an individual and to see me literally display happiness, not talking about it, but not being about it, being about what I'm talking about. So it changes, right? It's going to change for all of us. But for me, it's about being happy and demonstrating who I am now. Life isn't always about all ups, but you learn how to deal with the downs. And I think for me, that's success. It doesn't necessarily have to do with money, where I live. As long as I'm eating and I feel like I'm doing the right thing, I'm successful.
Now, I want you to want you to think back. I might want kind of two responses to this. One, maybe three. Your most memorable moment as a high school player, your most memorable moment as a collegiate player, and your most memorable moment as a coach. Just want to give you a little bit of time now.
Yeah. Well, for sure, high school, playing in the state championship, actually going to the state tournament. I remember it was at the Civic Center, and I remember as an 8th grader watching Roosevelt at the time, Robert Slick Hanna, who is my boy Elijah Hanna's older brother, played for Roosevelt. They had Bebop Walker, Tex Phillips, and MacArthur, and Wayne Charles. But I remember watching them in the state tournament as an 8th grader. So as a 9th grader, going into the state tournament, walking into the Civic Center with all the fans kind of, saying hi to you, asking you to sign their media guide. So it wasn't as much about the games versus the experience, but I remember the state tournament as my greatest high school memory. Okay. College, I had the opportunity to play in 3 postseason tournaments, but making it to the Sweet 16, playing Kentucky in the Sweet 16 at the time was an NCAA record for attendance. Magic Johnson in the crowd. Nowadays with social media and things like that, everybody plays on TV. But back then, you weren't playing on TV like that. So it was the first time my mom got to see me play. She came down. It was in Kansas City, so she drove down with the family. So I had people from Minneapolis coming. So I definitely playing Kentucky in the Sweet 16, even though we lost by, I think it was 11. That was a great experience. And then what was the third question?
As a coach.
As a coach. I would say, so unfortunately, I coached in several section finals. Now, a couple of them was against Jalen Suggs and Chet Holmgren. So, I never worried about winning those games. But my second year at Roosevelt, the year before we had won like 4 games. And my second year at Roosevelt, when we got to playoffs, we had 6 players. And we were getting on the bus for the semifinal to go. Now, we had won the first game, and we weren't supposed to win. We went and played our semifinal game, and one of our players out of the 6 didn't show up. And so we went to the section semifinal with 5 players. We lost the game by 3. And to me, that was the start of my career, understanding that hard work gives you an opportunity to compete. The team that we lost to ended up going to the to the state tournament, and they won the section final by like 30. And for us to be able to compete with them with 5 players, 2 sophomores, definitely my favorite experience as a coach.
Okay.
Rob, as we wrap things up, again, I'm so proud of you. I've seen you grow from a young man to now a successful grown man. I don't see no gray hair on you yet.
I got him, though.
But I'm just very proud of you, and I know Clyde was very proud of you as well. Anything that you want to tell our listeners, our viewers, to leave them with, that they can take with them and put in their scrapbook, something, or words of wisdom, anything you want to leave with them?
Yes, I think so. As you know, I got kids, and the one thing that I'm seeing, I'm in schools a lot. I'm lucky enough to travel a little bit, so I get to see kids from all over the country. I'm in LA a lot, here in Minneapolis, and the one thing I always like to tell kids is get off your phones a little bit. And I know I sound like an old man when I say this, right? Like read a newspaper, read a magazine, because I know kids they're reading when they're on their phone, but social media is not necessarily always real life. And I think a lot of times, and I have kids, so I get it, but I think sometimes we fail to really appreciate life. Social connections, human emotional connections are often lost in social media. And so for the young folks out there, the adolescents, the K-12 kids, give yourself an opportunity to actually talk to your friends You athletes out there, go to the movies with your friends, with your teammates. Get together, and do things as a group. Build chemistry together. Because if you're always on social media, you don't know what's real, you don't know what's not real, and you can't build that human connection. So that would be probably my message for the youth.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you. We want to thank Rob for stopping in, sharing his story with us, and myself and Charles. We like I said, Charles, seeing you grow up, I saw you as a freshman, and then grow into a fine young man. But we really appreciate you coming in.
Well, I do want to thank you too. So, just real quick, both of you guys have had an impact on my life. If you think about Minneapolis, St. Paul, just the metro area, if it wasn't for y'all, like I said, internet, social media has allowed basketball, the community issues to explode. But y'all have been there. Y'all have been there from the very beginning. Obviously, your pops, right? He is basically the messiah of the metro area, and I know you get tired of hearing, but yourself, you've had such an impact on me, on entire athletic community, and just the community in general. Coach Hallman, I've been knowing you since I can remember. We stay in touch. So I really appreciate the opportunity you guys have given me to add to this conversation. Keep doing what y'all doing. I brag about both of y'all to say that I know you, so I appreciate y'all for bringing me in. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Blacklight on Sports. My name is Charles Hallman.
My name is Dr. Mitchell Palmer McDonald.
And you can catch us in the print and online version of MSR. Also, you can catch me on Twitter. My handle is CH Journalism. CH Journalist. And definitely, you will keep listening to us. If you have any feedback, please get in touch with us by email, however way you want to do it. We thank Rob for coming in, and we'll be back soon.